Pete Buttigieg doesn't think much of the vice president's record. Let's compare. Despite pressure from the NRA, Joe Biden passed the assault weapons ban through Congress. Then, he passed the Violence Against Women Act. And even when public pressure mounted against him, former Mayor Pete fired the first African-American police chief of South Bend. And then he forced out the African-American fire chief, too. We're electing a president. What you've done matters.
There's that latest attack from former Vice President Joe Biden against our next guest. Mayor Pete Buttigieg is right here this morning. Welcome to This Week. As you know, we just heard from Vice President Biden on the program. Listening to him over the last 24 hours, he seems to be boiling down his message to a version of what we heard from Lloyd Bentsen back in 1988. I know Barack Obama. Barack Obama's a friend of mine. Pete Buttigieg is no Barack Obama.
Well, he's right. I'm not Barack Obama, and neither is he. Neither is anyone running for president right now. And this isn't 2008, it's 2020. And this election is about where our country is headed next. And, of course, how to defeat Donald Trump. What I'm offering right now, and the reason I think we have been able to succeed so far, is a message that is about building the sense of belonging and pulling together a coalition, a majority, that will not only defeat Donald Trump, but do it by a big enough margin that we send Trumpism into the history books.
But as you know, so far that coalition, from all the polling we've seen, does not include a sizable number of black voters. And the point that Vice President Biden is making is that if you don't get overwhelming support from black voters, you can't win the nomination, you can't win the presidency.
And I'm going to have to work to earn that vote, just as I did in South Bend. I was brought and returned to office by a multiracial coalition, and the voters who know me best in the African-American community are where I get the most support. Now, I know, especially heading into the South, that I'm now getting a second look from a lot of voters who, frankly, weren't sure if we were competitive in the first place, but know how important it is that we are prepared to build a campaign that calls everybody in, that will defeat Donald Trump, and that's exactly the work that we're doing. This is about belonging both within our campaign and across our country.
You seemed a little taken aback when Lindsey Davis on Friday night challenged you about the record of African-American arrests for marijuana possession in South Bend. Do you have to do a better job of owning your record in South Bend and explaining it?
Well, I've never been afraid to talk about the good, the bad, and the indifferent that we've experienced in South Bend. Look, when you're a mayor, you're not just calling for good things to happen. You have to be on the ground figuring it out. And when it comes to things like the systematic disparity in arrest rates and incarceration rates when it comes to marijuana, South Bend has not been immune. Now, as I was quick to point out, black residents in South Bend had a lower arrest rate for drug charges than in the state or than in the country.
But it did go up over your tenure as mayor.
There were ups and downs in the arrest rates, and we own that because that's part of the story of our city. It's also part of the story of a country that must legalize marijuana and end these kinds of disparities once and for all. We made tremendous progress in the city of South Bend, but of course we didn't resolve all of these issues. And what we've got to do now is have a national effort and be ready to use the powers of the presidency to reverse the harms of the incarceration policies that I have seen traumatize a generation of kids with incarcerated
So
parents.
what's the number one thing you would do January 20th in the White House 2021 to address that problem?
Well, we need to have a systemic vision for dismantling systemic racism. I've put it forward. It's called the Douglas Plan, and it's not only about criminal justice reform, taking federal action to lead the way in decarcerating this country, but actually it begins with economic empowerment, making sure that we are supporting black-owned businesses, making sure that not everybody's going to go start a business. We also just have to have basic economic policies about raising wages that we know disproportionately benefit workers of color. We've got to have economic empowerment, criminal legal system reform, and political empowerment, because part of the reasons decisions after decision after decision is made in a way that harms communities of color is that there has been systematic repression of voters of color. That's why we need a 21st Century Voting Rights Act, so the kind of voter suppression we've seen cannot stand.
Let's talk about Bernie Sanders. He attacked by name, I think, for one of the first times yesterday, saying you have billionaires by the dozen contributing to your campaign, and a guy who's getting a lot of money from pharmaceutical CEOs can't bring about real change.
Look, I have never hesitated to stand up. Matter of fact, we sued pharmaceutical companies for what they did to our community in the opioid crisis. I'm also putting together the campaign that's going to defeat Donald Trump. Trump and his allies are doing everything they can to hold on to power. They raised $25 million in one day. And if somebody wants to donate to a campaign, especially if they know that I'm going to raise their taxes, they're going to donate anyway, fine. We need to accept and encourage and welcome help from everybody who is part of this cause. And by the way, I rely very heavily on grassroots donations, people contributing through PeteForAmerica.com by the hundreds of thousands. We've gotten over 2 million contributions. I think the average is under $40. Someone like the mayor of South Bend does not become a major presidential candidate as an establishment powerhouse. We're here because we built a movement, and that's what's going to carry us to the White House.
Yeah, you know, I was a little surprised Friday night that you didn't take on the issue of socialism directly, given what President Trump is going to do with that. Are you concerned about that? Do you believe, and I asked Vice President Biden this question, do you believe that the Democrats can defeat Donald Trump if they have to defend socialism?
I think it'll be a lot harder, but the bigger concern that I have is further dividing the country. You know, when the campaign says that either you're for a revolution or you must be for the status quo, most of us don't see where we fit in that picture. And the irony is, at this moment, we actually have a historic American majority, not just aligned around what we're against, the need to get rid of Donald Trump, but what we're for. Most Americans want higher wages, want corporations and the wealthy to pay their fair share, want universal health care, action on prescription drugs, action on climate change, gun violence. We have a historic majority that we're going to need, not just in order to win, but in order to govern. Let's hold together and not blow up that American majority.
One of the things we're seeing here in New Hampshire, I think we saw it in Iowa as well, is Democrats are real uncertain about which way to go. You know, some polls show up to 40%, still deciding this last 48 hours. I ran into a voter yesterday who's trying to decide between Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg. You all seem pretty different to me, but how do you convince that voter to pick you over Bernie Sanders?
Well, if we're talking about a voter interested in progressive change, my message is that I would be the most progressive president we've had in a half century, but also that I'm putting together the governing coalition to get it done, that I am calling everyone into a sense of belonging that will unite Democrats who've been at our side all along, but also quite a few independents and even some Republicans who aren't going to agree with me on everything, but know that we need a different president. That's how we're going to win. That's how we're going to govern. And in a moment when our country is frighteningly polarized and divided, we're going to need some healing, not at the expense of our values, but in the name of our values.
Mayor, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good to be with you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.